Hey, welcome back to another episode in the Simple Nutrition Insights podcast. I am your host, Leonila Campos, registered dietitian. And in today's podcast, I want to talk about the gut, our gut microbiome. So I finished watching this Netflix documentary on hacking your health, and it's all about your gut. Let me tell you the right name. It's called Hack Your Health: The Secrets of Your Gut. There's different parts I really like, different parts that obviously need more research, and I'm sure there's more into that specific area, but overall I really liked how they talked about the importance of our gut microbiome and how is linked to just our overall well-being and the research behind that. And so obviously they're researching it more and more. And so I think that it is important to, as a dietitian, to come in and talk more about that because I'm sure there are questions, but also confusion, right? Like how can I improve? How can I optimize my health, my nutrition to improve my gut health, right? And so I did some research. I will add the research in the show notes. So if you're into research and reading more about it, you'll find it there. There's tons of research, right? Obviously, when you're looking at the how reliable the research is, you want to make sure that it's coming from a reputable resource, right? And so the National Institute of Health, or like a university, or what else? Yeah, or more so those places where they do a lot of research instead of like an article that you don't even know where it's coming from. So obviously do your due diligence and make sure that the research you're finding is actually coming from a reputable source. So anyway, let's start with what the microbiome, our gut microbiome is, right? So it is essentially the different microorganisms that live in our system, more specifically in our gastrointestinal system, right? So we even have microbes in our mouth, right? We're pretty much made out of microbes. So you can find them anywhere, right? But there is a higher concentration in your digestive system, obviously in your mouth, and it goes into your into your stomach, and then there's more into your small intestine, and there is the majority, right, a good quantity, a good amount in your colon. And so we have this higher concentration of microbes throughout our digestive system, right? And so we almost have to think about, okay, what is the reason why, right? Like, what is the purpose? What are the roles of these microbiomes in our overall health? And like, how can we help our microbiome to get better or to get healthier in order for us to be healthier in general? And so in the research that I was reading, right, it talks about the linkage between our microbiome and in our health, right? Specifically with our gut. So when we think about, and this is something that the document talks about, right? And I love actually the visuals. They are pretty good visuals because it really shows how the microbiomes work, specifically in our gut, right? We have this mucus, we have lining of the stomach and our intestines that protect, right? They create this barrier to make sure that only nutrients are going through that barrier and nothing else, right? Not other germs, no other types of bacteria, because then we can go into like these other health issues, right? Like systemic infections and such. And so, but this barrier, right, has to be, if there are things that are affecting it, like if there's inflammation, if there is a lot of stomach issues, right, or if there are infections all the time, that barrier, right, gets weaker. But also, if we're not feeding our microbiome, right, our good bacteria, our good microbes, which I'm gonna go in a moment as to like how can we feed our microbiome? Either they start to die out, right, or they start to eat the good bacteria. They start to eat that mucus barrier, right? And so now we get in trouble because now things that shouldn't go, that shouldn't cross that barrier, now they're crossing, right? And so then they can be presented in like more inflammation or skin issues or gut problems, right? Um, because we're not taking care of those microbes, we're not protecting that mucous barrier, right? And so to put it more in that perspective, and I actually seen these, as a dietitian, I see different conditions, and so in my practice, and so recently I had a client that came to me that was recently diagnosed with celiac disease, right? So she's allergic to gluten, and so um, if you eat gluten, but you have allergic reactions, but not to the point where you have anaphylaxis, right? Where you stop breathing or like just your airways get so inflamed that you cannot breathe. But it's there, right? So she didn't know that. She's in her 20s. And so the only reason why she was diagnosed, right, is because her mom also was diagnosed with it. So they recommended for like everybody to get checked just to make sure, right? Because they were having these stomach issues on and on of constipation and diarrhea, bloating. And so she didn't know why. And so they did, obviously they ran tests, right? They did, I think she said endoscopy and colonoscopy just to run this test to make sure, they're assessing different conditions possibly. And so she gets diagnosed, right, with celiac disease. And so as she comes to me, we're talking about, maybe possible symptoms when she started to get these stomach issues. And she said, since I can remember, I've always had stomach issues. Would always have um, like reactions to when eating bread or when eating pastas, right? But there was never that strong connection as to like why, right? Why am I having these symptoms? To her, at this point, it's normal, right? Like this is what I get every time I eat XYZ. And so she didn't think anything to it. She mentioned that at times she would get like rashes or she would get so itchy. And these are reactions to something that you're allergic to, right? Or maybe you might have a sensitivity or intolerance to. And so when you think about, like, if you were to look at the stomach, right, look at the intestines, there's these tiny, tiny hair-likes, right? They're called microvilli. And those microvilli help to absorb nutrients, right? And so when we eat something that we know that we're allergic to or that we're intolerant to or sensitive to, there is that autoimmune response, right? Like your autoimmune system sends these fighters, right? These knights to fight whatever the invader is, right? In this case, it could be food, right? In this case, it's gluten. And so, but that damages those tiny villi, right? Every time that there is, gluten eating, we eat it and it goes into our digestive system, is damaging that mucus, right? It's damaging those bacteria, it's damaging that microvilli. And so then you get to have more symptoms, right? And so it's not until we stop eating those foods, right, that we start to feel better because we're allowing our gut to heal, right? We're allowing those microvilli to replenish and repair. And so, she mentioned that once she got the diagnosis, right, she has been omitting everything that has gluten, and she's feeling much better, right? She's like, I can't, my brain functions better, right? And I'm not having like bloating and I'm not having these bouts of constipation and diarrhea. And so the same thing happens, right? If you eat dairy or if you consume dairy and you say, oh, when I have milk, I get bloating and I get gas and I get diarrhea. But, I still do it anyway. Now, yes, we might deal with the symptoms at the moment, right? But that's a sign. Your body's telling you, hey, this does not go well with me, right? Because I get these reactions. And so what you're doing is basically, damaging those microvilli, damaging the lining of the stomach and intestines. Because the more you do it, right, the more you get symptoms. But now that area is getting weaker and weaker. And so what we have to do, right, it's just becoming so irritated, inflamed. And so what we have to do is like stopping, right? I know sometimes that is hard because maybe we love milk, we love ice cream, or whatever the case may be. But when you think about it, right, long term, you're not allowing your system to heal and repair. And so then, and you're also creating these antibodies, right? Creating these cascade of inflammatory response because, right, your body recognizes, say, okay, this is damaging, we should attack it. And so you're not helping your system, right, to heal and repair. And so how do you expect your system or you to feel better, right, if you keep adding those foods? So I hear that a lot often, actually. Usually, some people say, I don't get it with cheese, which is common, right? Cheese, it is made out of milk, but it's mostly fat. So there's not a huge amount of those milk proteins that are going to cause that effect versus having a full glass of milk, right? Or yogurt or cheese or ice cream or whatever. And so if it is because of the lactose in it, right? Now there are other options that you can choose to help, your digestive system to be able to break down, right, and digest that food. But anyway, a little bit about that in terms of digestion and how we can take care of our system, our gut, our GI health, right, in that sense. But this article that I am linking, that I'm adding into the show notes, it talks about that linkage between our autoimmune, our immunity, right? That our microbiome has a huge role in our immune system, right? So, and it makes sense when you think about it, because those microbiomes that we have throughout our digestive system and our GI tract, they act as protectors, right? Think of them as warriors, right? So if there is something that we ingest or we get it from the environment, right? Those little warriors are going to fight the enemies, right, in our gut, which is going to help our immunity. Of course, again, and I'm going to go into that in a moment, we have to make sure that the environment where these microbiomes are living is optimal, right? We're feeding them. And so in order for them to continue to do their job. Otherwise, again, they either die out or they start eating on that mucus lining, which now we get in trouble, right? Instead of helping our immune system, now we're adding more strain into it. And so our systems can only do so much to, increase our immunity. But there's also a huge correlation between the gut and the brain axis, right? Because there's that communication between our gut and our brain. Again, and I think I say this a lot, we're not separated by organs, right? We're a whole person. And so our systems communicate with each other, right? The same thing with our gut and our brain. There is that communication between neurons, between hormones, between immunological signaling that, work together with our microbiome. And so there is some research that shows there too, right? That when there's that dysbiosis, when there's that maybe our microbiome is not working properly, right, for different reasons, that can also affect that gut and brain axis, right, and communication between our gut and our brain. And there's a good amount of research that also shows that high levels of stress, right, affect our microbiome. Because when you think about the different sensations that you feel, right, so for example, when you're in love, right, you feel butterflies in your stomach, right? And that sends signals to your brain and vice versa. And so we have all these feelings. Same thing when you're so angry, right? You feel it in your gut, or when you're scared, or when you're going to do something that is dangerous, right? You feel it in your gut. There is that connection, right? And so when there is that imbalance in your gut, there is going to be an imbalance in our brains too, right? Because you're having that connection. It's not that the gut is not connecting to the brain again. There's that connection there too. So it's just so amazing, right? I find this research just so fascinating, and now there's a lot more research about it too, and how it affects different metabolic diseases, right? Such as type 2 diabetes and obesity, and in weight issues, because it is tied up, right? And I think that the documentary also talks about that in the different research studies that have been done, right, in animals, and also followed by, like human cases as well. Um, and so I think it is important to be aware of these things, right? But now, what do we do? Like, how do we help our microbiome, right, to get better? How do we help it to, or how do we help those microbes to grow, right, and stay strong? And that is food, right? When you think about everything that we consume on a daily basis, right, that is going to affect your microbiome. Now, our microbiome, when we are in utero, right, unborn, we live in this environment that is sterile, right? It's all clean. And when we are born, usually we are born naturally through the vagina, right? We get our first microbiome, or our first microbes, through the birth canal, right? If it's through C-section, there is that less of exposure to that environment. And then we continue to get more microbes right through the breast milk. And as we continue to add food, right, we continue to grow our microbes. And that's how we continue to build our microbiome, essentially, right? And so it changes. It changes with what we eat. Now, there is strong research that shows that there are things that affect our microbiome. And that is that the consumption of highly processed foods, right? Consumption of refined flours and sugars that is not only causing the microbes to not be able to use that fuel, right, as food, but it also creates inflammation, more so systemic inflammation, meaning inflammation throughout your body, right? And so obviously we want to be able to limit that, right? We want to be able to add more of these wholesome foods. This is where we're going to be able to really, really help our microbiome. We have to be able to add, different types of fibers, right? Different types of starches coming from food, right? Like potatoes and leeks and garlic and onions that are going to give us that prebiotic, right? Which is the food that feeds the probiotic, which is the microbes, right? There is now I should have looked into the financial changes in this area, right? Because in the past, I don't know, 5 years, maybe 10 years, there has been a huge increase in that addition of probiotics, and recently the increase in prebiotics, right? And so because of it, because there's more research coming out in terms of how important our microbiome is. But my friend, just like with anything that I talk about here, we want to be able to do it with food first, right? Because again, when you think about adding food, you're not only going to get prebiotics, right? You're not only going to get, which is that fiber, you're going to get antioxidants, you're going to get phytochemicals to help your cells, basically to help you not only on your microbes, but to help you at a cellular level. And so versus like, oh, let me take this pill, right, or this powder or whatever, that is only for that specific purpose, right? No, we want to be able to do these with food first. So adding these different types of foods, right? When you think about, and I think this is where the document shows, right, like where one of the participants, which is a chef, it created, this smoothie with so many, I don't remember how many she said, like 26 different types of fruits and vegetables, right? And I think some powders. And she even said, like, how is someone going to be able to do these, right, on a consistent basis? And she's not wrong, right? She's absolutely correct. And so, but that is not the point, right? The point here is that we are still able to add those foods. We're still able to add a variety of fruits and vegetables to feed our gut microbiomes, and not necessarily all at once, right? We can add, and the way that we can do it, right, is adding, at least I don't know, maybe 4 to 5 different types of servings of fruits and vegetables, right? Ideally different kinds to get, again, different types of nutrients. But if we are at a point where we're like, I'm not even adding one serving, right? Let's start there, right? Let's start adding one every single day for the next week, right? And then the next week, let's add two every single day, right? For the next week or so. Think of it that way, right? You're already feeding your microbes, right? Your gut microbiome by adding that one serving, right? Again, the more that you're going to add, the more variety, and your gut microbiome is going to love that. So think of like different colors, right? Different colors of fruits and vegetables, different types of nuts and seeds, adding some, onion and garlic to your meals, right? That can give you more of that prebiotic. Adding different types of beans, legumes, and lentils, right, to your meals, because of that fiber, right? That prebiotic fiber that we need to feed our microbes. And so, yes, someone might say, well, we don't even get any nutrition from fiber. Yeah, the fiber is not going to be for you per se, but it's going to be to feed your microbes, right? Which essentially are going to help you with your health, right? Is that symbiosis that we have with microbes, right? We feed the microbes and they're going to help us stay healthy and help our immune system and help our brain, our gut and brain axis, and help our overall gut health. And so if we see it that way, right? It is a relationship that we want to continue to build by adding different kinds of fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, right? Which are some examples. Again, in the show notes, you're going to find a handout that is going to have the prebiotics, right? What kind of prebiotics you can add, you can start with. Now, there could be a question, okay, can I add a probiotic, right? A probiotic, which is the good bacteria. Now, the answer would be more maybe yes or no. You should consult your healthcare provider first, of course, because there's tons of probiotics out there, right? There's some that might not even do anything, to our gut microbiome. There's some that might help, but it's real difficult to say, yeah, for sure that one is going to help. Now, with supplements, right? And this is across the board. They're not FDA regulated. Now, there are some that are third party tested, right? Which is what you want to do. You want to find one that is third party tested, because that means that they're testing it, right? To see if it's pure, to see if it does what it is meant to do, and so on. And so, if that's something that you want to try, right? Maybe you're struggling with your gut health and you're adding these prebiotics, but you also want to be able to maybe add some probiotics, because one of the things that you have to really understand here is that most probiotics are going to have maybe one or two types of bacteria, right? There's different strains of bacteria, but there might be only one or two types. And so essentially we're just growing those types, right? And so if this is something that you're doing already and you've been on that probiotic for months and years, consult with your healthcare provider, right, or your dietitian, to see if there is a possibility to change it to a different one that has different types of strains, right? Again, to diversify your gut microbiome and not only grow, those two kinds or such. But definitely, right, starting with food first. Now, if you're someone that hasn't been able to add, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, lentils, don't start with like, oh, I'm gonna add 2 cups every day, right, or 5 cups every day, because your gut is going to hurt, right? Your body's not used to, your digestive system is not used to getting that high amount of fiber, high amount of probiotics, and so you're gonna have some bloating, right, some gut issues. So you want to be able to add it slowly, right? Maybe half a cup, half a serving at a time for the first 3 to 5 days, increase it slowly until you get to those two servings, right? Let's say 2 cups of vegetables with each meal, which is usually what I recommend. in terms of making balanced meals, right? And then adding that variety, right? Again, the more variety you add of these foods, the more nutrients you're going to get, right? The more diversity you're going to have in terms of your meals. And you're going to get just overall different types of nutrients, right? That your body and your cells are going to need and utilize. So think of it like that. Now, if this is super overwhelming and you're like, I don't know where to start. Again, I gave you a few pointers here, right? Start with one food at a time, right? And slowly add a variety. Start introducing them slowly. Now, if you're like, I'm really struggling to get, my prebiotics or to get the total amount of fiber that I need, which here in the US, right, the recommended amount is, over 25 grams of fiber a day. More would be ideal, right? But at least if we can get 25 grams of fiber, and the way that you're going to be able to achieve that, right, is by adding those 2 cups of vegetables at each meal and adding some, different fruits in between, 2 to 3 fruits, in your meals. And then on top of that, you're adding maybe nuts and seeds, lentils, legumes. You can get your fiber that way, right? You don't really need a supplement. But if you're like, I don't even know where to start, or I'm really struggling here, you can also go back to an episode that I did with, I think it was with Dr. Kashik, where we talked about constipation. I linked in that episode in the show notes a handout that has high fiber foods. So you can go, visit that, go and listen to that episode if you haven't, but also in the show notes, you'll be able to find a resource to help you and get started with like the different types of foods that you can add to increase your fiber, which is going to increase the prebiotic essentially, right? To help you feed your microbiome. But if at the end of the day, you're like, there's so much that I need to do, right? Like I'm feeling so overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. I'm just confused. Reach out to me, right? Send me a message, give me a call, and we can, get together and I can help you be able, create that plan for you to get you started with like feeding your microbiome, essentially. So that information again is also going to be in the show notes. But don't complicate things, right? Don't start adding like a whole bunch of supplements or a whole bunch of other things that, is going to cost so much money. And, start with food first, right? Again, because, and I'm going to say this time after time, you're not only going to get the prebiotics, right? You're not only going to get the fiber, you're going to get so much more from food, right? You're going to be able to get antioxidants and phytochemicals and all these components that our bodies need, not only to satisfy hunger, but to fuel our bodies through a cellular, and so at our cellular level. So think about it that way, right? But keep it super simple. Again, start with like maybe 1 or 2 different types of foods, produce or whatever that you want to add, and then slowly build up, the variety of foods that you consume. And if you get to a point where you're like, I want to explore, maybe different supplements or whatever the case may be, again, consult with your healthcare provider, consult with your dietitian to make sure that what you choose is adequate. I've done 2 episodes, one on water-soluble vitamins, one on fat-soluble vitamins, and just, the amount that we get, and that is more is not always good. So if you haven't listened to those episodes, go back. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts. But I think that is it for today, my friend. Just wanted to come and talk about that. Some final thoughts on the documentary, right? Overall, I thought it was it had some really good points. I love the graphics, right, and the explanation. A lot of times we need those visuals. I did find dangerous how one of the participants was doing her own fecal transplantation, right, by herself. And I think one of the doctors or scientists said that is not recommended because that can lead to like serious issues. And so, if you're interested in that, you can always, I'm sure you can find information about that where it's safe and you can explore those options. But you always want to be able to be safe when you do things like that, right? The other thing too that I also think is extremely important when it comes to the gut and brain, access connection is that it is okay, right? And I did an episode, I think it's the last episode that I did about mental health and nutrition. And so coming as a team, right? And so if you're having mental health issues, right, but you also want to be able to take care of your nutrition, working together, right, with your mental health provider and your dietitian, um, essentially to optimize your well-being, right? Because you need those tools, you need skills, right, to be able to manage those strong emotions. And so that together, right, can really improve your overall well-being. um let's see what else. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. Again, if you have any questions, if you need me to talk about anything else, or if you have any kind of feedback, reach out to me, right? Stay strong, my friend. Stay healthy. And I will see you in another episode. Thank you so much. Bye bye for now.